Hello everybody, as I'm sure you've all heard by now, Seth Jones has been traded from the Chicago Blackhawks to the Florida Panthers, and in today's video I'm just going to be giving my thoughts on it. But before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. Well, obviously that kind of materialized quickly and a trade was done, and I think that this is one of those deals where you knew something was probably coming, especially with Seth's recent comments about the team, and it's just the way it goes. But with a big trade that happens, just again in the speed of light, you do have the talk of who won and who lost. But I think before we get to that point, we have to talk about how we got here beforehand. So obviously Seth was shipped off to Chicago 4 years ago, and he played with this team. Over the course of those 4 seasons, they were never particularly good. In fact, their best season came his first year in the Windy City, as they had 28 wins. And this has been a team that's been rebuilding for a while. And I think looking back at this, especially now, it really was a head scratcher to give him that big of a contract, especially when this team wasn't necessarily ready to compete. And then as years wore on, I think that his patience just wore down, because in his time with Columbus, they were a regular side in the playoffs. And in Chicago, they weren't really anywhere close to sniffing the postseason. And obviously not winning is not going to be something that is ideal for any player. And I think paired with the poor results that you saw with the numbers and whatnot for Jones, this deal really did take a black eye. And that's something that we've talked about before, where you've seen articles saying that the Seth Jones contract is the worst in the entirety of the league. There's been times where it certainly hasn't looked great, but I don't think that for the course of this full stint, it has been by far the worst deal. It's just tough because you were hoping for one thing and you got another. But at the end of the day, Seth wanted to go to a place where there is a winning culture, and that's exactly what he got. He got the best place in the league right now currently as he gets shipped over from Chicago to Florida. They just won the Stanley Cup, defending champs, and they are in a spot right now where they're competing for the Atlantic Division yet again. And this is going to be interesting because you get Seth Jones, and people again will probably look at it and say, oh, well, he's bad and he's just past his prime, whatnot. But you have to remember the defenseman that he was in his time in Columbus, and I think that that is really what Florida is hoping to get more of. I think he's going to go out there and be a top 10 defenseman in the league? Maybe not, but I certainly think that things are going to get better for him. And in Chicago's case, things are really interesting here because they get kind of an interesting return in all this, as they get Spencer Knight and a first-round pick. And Spencer is a very intriguing player, young goalie that's got a decent amount of NHL experience that could be aligned more with what their timeline is. And then another first-round pick certainly doesn't hurt here. And I think that in Chicago's case, you're probably looking at this and seeing something where you say, you know what, all things considered, the length of this deal, the amount of money that they ended up giving him and whatnot, to be able to get a young goalie that could be part of your future. I'm not saying that he's going to be their star just yet, because obviously things aren't set in stone, but maybe a good young goalie for the future and a first-round pick for a guy that had been viewed as, again, somebody that was not going to be getting a great haul. This is pretty good. But I think for Florida's part too, things could be good for them on the flip side. And this is again going back to what the Panthers are. A top team that is contending, that just went out and acquired a player that very well could be that X factor. And I know the deciding factor in all this probably could be viewed in the short term, but he has got 5 years left on his deal after this, and Florida is only going to be taking on 75% of that. So they're getting a discount and possibly getting an upgrade. And I would like to highlight again, Seth Jones was 33rd for a defenseman over the past 4 seasons in points, playing with a Chicago team that is nowhere near as good as Florida is. And I know that he's not really been a big goal scorer in the league, but he's been a guy that's kind of racked up assists and been known more for that offensive game. I would like to think that his numbers are going to go up in Florida, and he's going to be much more dangerous, and we're going to see more of a career resurgence, more of a career revival, if you will, where people will talk about it and say, no, Seth Jones is a good defenseman. We are going to chalk that up in that stint in Chicago, saying that it is a team sport, and he was put, again, in a really bad spot. And now he's in a good spot, and this is where I say, is he ever going to win a Norris? Probably not. But for a team in Florida that has been like other cup-winning teams where they've lost pieces, I don't think this is the end-all be-all. I know it probably hurts losing Spencer Knight, but is he necessarily going to take over for Bob right away? Again, the answer is probably not. Is that first-round pick going to help them right away? The answer is probably not. Whereas Seth Jones, a experienced defenseman that is still relatively young, where Chicago is eating a decent amount of the cap, I'm not seeing a world where this is going to be a totally bad thing. The blue line is in better shape. I think Seth could, again, be one of those guys that you would suddenly say is a massive boost to this team for the playoffs and that is going to be big, especially in injuries and whatnot, knowing you have a guy like Jones on the blue line. And for the Panthers, I've already said it before, when you have already won a championship, especially, and you know that you are really committed to what you've got right now, I don't think that it matters as much. And I can't remember who did an article. I'll see if I can find the clip. And I know I always forget to put it in there, but I remember them saying that Florida, I think, has one pick in the upcoming draft, or it might be 3 drafts, whatever it is. It doesn't really concern me because, especially now with the league being bigger and bigger, you just really have to ride on any success you can get. I know that I say you want to try to be competitive year in and year out, over and over and over again. But if the league keeps expanding, I mean, really all we're going to be looking at is banners. We're not going to say, well, this team ended up making the playoffs 17 years in a row. They went on to the second round 10 times. They made it to the Eastern Conference Final 5 times, yada, yada, yada. It's going to matter about, did you make it to the Stanley Cup Final? Did you win championships? And Florida is in a spot right now where they've made it 2 times in a row, could be 3, and they're not afraid to make a big move at a time where, again, we've talked about how things haven't been going perfectly for them. And a team like Tampa Bay, which is, of course, in Florida, has won 8 in a row, and they are catching up, and the Maple Leafs are getting hot. And this is all despite Austin Matthews kind of having cold stints. So Panthers decided we have to get aggressive in a period where other teams in our division are, right there with us. Now, as a side note, again, circling back to the goalie conversation, Sergei Bobrovsky is going to be an interesting talk here. Older goalie that is going to be a free agent, I believe, after next year. Is he going to fit into Florida's timeline? I don't know. And if he isn't, who is going to be that goalie for this team that wants to contend for cups? Again, I'm not sure. But as for a guy like Spencer Knight, had a hard road in the NHL at times, and I really am hoping for the best for him. I am hoping that he doesn't, really get thrown to the wolves out in Chicago. I think the great thing about this is, again, he's already got a decent amount of experience. He knows the highs and the lows of the league. But Chicago is in a very weird spot where a lot of these younger guys are getting some minutes and things aren't always going flawlessly. So there's no need to rush Spencer Knight. Again, timeline. Knight doesn't have to be for now. Whereas again, I think Jones, we need to get as much of a return as we can out of him. But when you've got a vocal player saying we're the same team we were at the start of the year, and that's kind of the problem, you knew things probably weren't going to be working, especially when you had this amount of contract left. So for this deal, I think it could be a win-win. I think I'm in kind of the majority here with this. Knight could be a good goalie. Chicago could get a good pick out of this. And then Jones could play a pivotal role for the Florida Panthers as they try to chase cups. So hopefully it works out for everybody. But what are your thoughts? Leave them down below. Is Jones a trash defenseman that is going to put up terrible numbers with Florida? Is he going to get better? Is he going to become elite? Is Spencer Knight going to be Chicago's goalie? All that stuff down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you love hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.